The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Lords Spiritual Women Act 2015 Extension Bill Lords, second reading.
Minister to move second reading.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I beg to move that the bill now be read a second time. And I'm pleased to open the debate on this important but straightforward piece of legislation. And I should start by welcoming the Shadow Paymaster General to his role. And I've no doubt we will have some great robust debates over this dispatch box, but I would just say to him that I really very much hope that we can continue the cross-party work that his predecessor and I were pursuing on infected blood compensation, where the cross-party working was extremely important, and I hope that will continue now that he is in the shadow role. Now, members will of course be aware, indeed we had the debate on Tuesday, about reform of the House of Lords. But I should be clear with the House that this bill is distinct from those reforms. It's not seeking to make fundamental changes. Its simple effect is to extend by 5 years the arrangements for the appointment of Lords Spiritual contained in the Lords Spiritual Women Act 2015. And like the 2015 Act, Madam Deputy Speaker, the bill is introduced at the request of the Church of England. Now, I think it would be helpful if I just give the House some background as to how we arrived here. There are 26 bishops that sit in the House of Lords, and before 2015, the process for how and when they sit in the other place was determined solely by the Bishoprics Act of 1878. 5 seats are automatically allocated to the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Archbishop of York, followed by the bishops of London, Durham and Winchester. The remainder were filled on the basis of seniority, in other words, length of tenure. Now, in 2014, the General Synod of the Church of England passed legislation to allow women to become bishops for the first time. But because of the rules of seniority, Madam Deputy Speaker, we would have had to wait many years before these first female bishops could have been eligible to receive their writs of summons and become Lords Spiritual. And that would have created a situation where women were prominently involved in church leadership, but were unrepresented in the House of Lords. Now, to address this at the request of the Church, both houses passed legislation in 2015 to fast-track female bishops into the House of Lords. And the effect of that legislation is that if there is a female diocesan bishop available when a Lord's spiritual seat becomes vacant, she will be appointed to the seat ahead of a male bishop, irrespective of seniority. Now, since enacted, the Act has had a clear effect. We have seen 6 female bishops sit in the other place earlier than they otherwise would have done. The Bishop of Gloucester was appointed to the House as the first female bishop on 7th of September 2015. And since this first appointment, the Lords Spiritual have welcomed 6 more women to sit on their benches. The value of the legislation is about to be seen in action again. Following the recent retirement of the Bishop of Worcester, the Bishop of Peterborough, Debbie Selin, will soon replace him in the Lords under the provisions of the 2015 Act. And then the recently appointed Bishop of Coventry, Sophie Jelly, will be first in line for appointment to the House of Lords upon any future retirements. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you can see, there has been progress, but there remain only a handful of female bishops on the Lord's spiritual benches today. The issue is that that 2015 Act will expire in May 2025. So what this 5-year extension, the 5-year extension contained in this bill does, is to allow more time for the positive acts and positive effects of that 2015 piece of legislation to operate. And the bill means that if any of the Lord's spiritual seats that are not automatically allocated become vacant between now and 2030, they will continue to be filled by the most senior eligible female bishop, if there are any available at that point. I will happily give way.
Very grateful, Madam Speaker, to my right honourable friend for giving way, and I'm enjoying immensely his very detailed explanation of how we got here. But can I ask the Minister what conversations he's had with the Church about the steps they can take to increase diversity of potential bishops and also to make sure that ultimately there's a wider pool of people to appoint to the House of Lords?
Yes, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. I certainly have, as he would imagine, had discussions with the Church of England, not just prior to the introduction of this bill, but also the wider reform of the Lords that the government is engaged in. And I think those conversations, and I say to my honourable friend, are hugely important. And diversity is hugely important. And this is actually an act that is going to extend that diversity to have women bishops in the House of Lords that we've seen since the 2015 Act reached the statute book. And it is the view of the government that 5 years is an appropriate length of time to extend these provisions to consolidate that positive effect that there's been so far. And I hope that this very narrowly focused, simple bill that is extending that act, extending that positive change of the last 9 years, will gain the support of all sides of the House. I beg to move, Madam Deputy Speaker.
And the question is that this bill be now read a second time. I now call the Shadow Minister, Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Paymaster General for his clear introduction of this legislation today, and also for the praise that he gave to my predecessor, the Right Honourable Member for Salisbury. I would very much like to continue the work that he did on the infected blood scandal with the Paymaster General, and I look forward to working with him on that. Can I also thank him for his warm welcome from his side of the House to myself today. In fact, I was a special advisor in the House of Lords in the months after the Act was passed, so I saw the introduction firsthand of the first female bishops. Now, as Paymaster General, this is an important role the Honourable Member has. He will remember Viscount Addison did it back in the 1940s. The first Labour Knight of the Garter, which I'm sure the Paymaster General himself today should be something to look forward to perhaps in the future. But this is a straightforward bill, limited in its scope with the purpose of simply extending the Lord's Spiritual Women Act of 2015 by another 5 years. Introduced by the coalition government and complementing the legislation introduced a year prior to allow women to become bishops in the first place, the Lord's Spiritual Women Act intended to make sure that those women had a fair chance of sitting alongside their male counterparts as one of the 26 Lords Spiritual. And I would say that overall it seems to have been successful in doing so. The original legislation suspended the rules that automatically elevated the most senior diocesan bishop to the House of Lords, instead elevating female diocesan bishops if available. And this has meant that there are now 6 women in the Lords, all of whom have made valuable contributions in the other place. The extension of this bill is even shorter, simply extending the sunset clause that was agreed in 2015 and maintaining the suspension in rules so that female bishops will join the Lord's Spiritual slightly sooner than they would otherwise have done. So I express our support for this simple piece of legislation from this side of the House. When we first introduced this legislation, it was agreed that a 10-year span would be there and give sufficient time to assess the effectiveness of the legislation. And because we are here today, I believe that we can probably agree that that time frame was absolutely was fine. So, look, I would like to ask the Chancellor of the Duchy, sorry, not the Chancellor of the Duchy, the Paymaster General, when he expects this legislation will no longer be necessary. I predict that he might respond by saying 2030, and that because that is the date set for the sunset of this legislation. But can the Minister confirm why it is this time frame that has been selected? As I previously mentioned, there are 6 women bishops in the House of Lords, and I'm glad that the legislation has supported them in contributing so meaningfully to Parliament. But can the Minister explain why to the House why he expects he will need to, whether or not he expects, that we'll need to see another 5-year extension in a few years' time? Thank you very much indeed.
Marsha de Cordova.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm start by saying how pleased I am to be speaking in support of this bill at its second reading. And can I also congratulate my right honourable friend for his opening remarks. In 2014, the Church of England made it possible for women to become bishops. Therefore, the usual process of appointing bishops to the other place meant it would have taken many years for women bishops to enter. And that is why the 2015 Act was brought in, helping to speed up the representation of women among the Lord Spirituals. Today, as we debate this short and narrow bill, I want to pay tribute to some of the women bishops who have made history. The Church of England's first woman bishop, Libby Lane, took her place as the Bishop of Stockport in 2015. Indeed. And now, the Bishop of Derby, she is known for her dignified and fought-for leadership and her advocacy for children and young people. And the first female Lord Spiritual was Rachel Truick, entering the Lords in 2015, and during her tenure, she was campaigning tirelessly for prison reform, especially on how prison affects women and families. She has called for more race, class, gender and age diversity in the Church, and she pushed for a human response to refugees. And she also looked at ways that we can improve children's sense of self-worth, value and confidence. I must also pay tribute to the Lord Bishop of London, Sarah Mullally. Deeply engaged with her community she serves, a former chief nursing officer, she has promoted the living wage and spoken up for our beloved National Health Service. She's spoken up for the most vulnerable in society, including the elderly and those facing persecution. But since then, the 2015 Act helped speed up the entry of 6 women bishops to the other place. And we now have 25 Lord Spirituals, 7 of whom are women. Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope I am making the values of those women bishops' contributions in the Lords clear today. Women bishops in the Lords enrich debate and provide much needed representation. Here I must mention the Lord Bishop of Chelmsford, Gully Frances de Carney, who came to Britain as a refugee when her family was fleeing persecution during the Iranian Revolution. In the other place, she has carefully and intelligently worked hard to scrutinise policy on issues including housing, immigration and criminal justice. It is also apparent to me, like so many of her colleagues, she truly listens to the views of others, speaking with grassroots knowledge and most importantly about the region with which she is under the care of. The progress we have seen making the Lord Spirituals more diverse is good and to be celebrated. But we know, and the Church knows, another push is needed to make the Lord Spirituals representative and to bring it more up to date. And this is particularly the case when we think about women bishops from Black, Asian and ethnic minority backgrounds who make such an important contribution and are currently underrepresented in the other place and more broadly in the Church. Indeed.
On that point, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just acknowledge the history-making nature of her appointment as the Second Estate's Church Commissioner, which I hope demonstrates our commitment to diversity and representation.
And I thank my honourable friend for his contributions, and it truly is an honour and a privilege to serve in this position. I want to acknowledge the trailblazing Bishop of Dover, Rose Hudson Wilkins, the first black woman to become a Church of England bishop. She was the chaplain to Her late Majesty, and for 9 years she was the chaplain to the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow. And also she was the first woman, I might say, to carry out that role. Her presence as a leader in the Church is a call to young women from diverse backgrounds not to shy away from the work that they want to do. But the Bishop of Dover is not yet one of many. There is more work to do, and that's why this bill will help with. It is a narrow bill extending the existing provisions for 5 years, and that should get us closer to the place where the Lord Spirituals better represent the makeup of our country. That's why I support the bill and hope members across this House will also do the same. Thank you.
I now call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Liberal Democrats are supportive of the extension of this legislation and its ambition to make our second chamber a more equal and representative place. If passed, this bill would extend the time frame for the process of acceleration of women bishops to the other chamber, meaning when a vacancy arises amongst the 21 bishops appointed by seniority, it would be filled by the most senior eligible female bishop, with the goal of reaching gender parity as soon as possible. And we're glad of the intention of this bill in addressing the stark gender imbalance which currently exists amongst our Lords Spiritual. We're supportive of this aim, and we welcome the steps to ensure that Parliament better reflects the country it serves. Fundamentally, however, we want to see complete reform of the House of Lords, strengthening the authority of our second chamber with a democratic mandate. Parliament should be a body which represents and reflects the diversity and richness of the people and cultures that make up this country, and we must do all we can to make that happen across both houses. This bill aims to ensure significant female representation amongst the Lords Spiritual by extending the arrangements of the Lords Spiritual Women Act by an additional 5 years, so its powers continue until 2030. Without it, the position would return to the status quo ante, whereby bishops become members of the House of Lords according to their time in office. And given the relatively recent legislation being enacted in 2014, allowing women to become bishops, it's vital that this provision is extended, continuing to address this historic inequality and accelerate the move towards gender parity in our upper chamber. We do, however, think that while this extension of this Act is a positive step to ensure the bishops and the Lords are more representative of the country as a whole, as well as their congregations, and this bill, in supporting a move towards gender parity, is a significant step towards moving towards a more representative Parliament. And while we're supportive of the legislation, we welcome all moves towards creating a more balanced Parliament, we must question why the latest legislation was unsuccessful in reaching the goal of gender parity for bishops in the upper chamber over the past decade. What further measures are needed to be taken to increase accessible routes to create a more equal Parliament? So I asked the Minister why this legislation continues to be restricted with a time limit, and what conversations has he had with the Church of England regarding this. Does the Minister believe that 5 additional years is sufficient time to reach equal representation, given the slow progress achieved with the original piece of legislation, allowing just 6 women bishops to take up seats in the House of Lords? Although I pay tribute to the member for Battersea for her excellent speech in really highlighting the successes of the women who've been able to take up those roles. We must question why the latest legislation was unsuccessful and what other steps we should be taking in order to reach the goal of gender parity. With pleasure.
And I do want to acknowledge the temperate and sensible approach she's taken to these matters. I wonder whether she, on the point of a question, would share my query of where all those this week who've shown an interest in bishops' presence in the House of Lords happen to be this afternoon.
I thank the gentleman for his point, and I think I agree with him. There was a great flurry of interest when I was stood here on Tuesday, previously making many of these points already this week on the matter of the makeup of the House of Lords. And I agree with him. It's extremely strange that the people who spent such a long time discussing these issues on Tuesday afternoon did not want to take the opportunity to discuss them further today. I am sure it is our collective loss that they did not take up the opportunity.
I'm not sure about that.
It is vital, however, that we go further in moving towards equality in all aspects of public and political life, and broader reform of the House of Lords is an essential step in achieving this. I was glad earlier this week that the Hereditary Peers Bill moved through this chamber, perhaps not with the speed we might have hoped. With not a single current hereditary peer being a woman, this legislation was an important step in addressing the gender imbalance of the other place, and we are supportive of this. This new Parliament in the Commons has seen a series of firsts. The first time that the proportion of women elected to this House has surpassed 40%. The first time this country has had a female Chancellor of the Exchequer, and the first time we have had a black woman leading one of the main political parties in this country. And while I'm glad to be supporting this legislation today, which will accelerate the move towards gender parity of our Lords Spiritual, it is vital that we continue to take steps to build a more equal and representative Parliament at all levels. In our recent general election, only 37% of candidates put forward by major parties were women. We're grateful to the work of organisations like 50/50 Parliament and Centenary Action, who work tirelessly to support more women into politics at all levels. Diverse governments are more resilient and make better decisions. It's essential that our elected bodies are drawn from the widest possible pool of talent and experience, and that Parliament better reflects the country it serves. More broadly, we're supportive of wider political reform, including reform of our upper chamber. We believe there are critical steps which the government must take to strengthen democratic rights and encourage broader participation in politics. So we will continue to urge the new government to be bolder in modernising our upper chamber, including by introducing the promised retirement age, implementing the findings of the Burns report, and giving the Lords the proper legitimacy that our second chamber should have with a democratic mandate. Political engagement is at a historic low. Voter participation in our recent general election was the lowest since 2001, with fewer than 60% of eligible voters casting their ballot. It's vital we do all we can to restore public trust in government. Broad and equal representation across both chambers is a crucial step in doing that. So we look to the government to support our pledges to modernise our electoral system, including by investing in electoral procedures to ensure the electoral register is accurate and up to date. We will continue to call on the government to scrap the Conservative Party's voter ID scheme and expand political and democratic engagement by extending the right to vote to 16 and 17-year-olds. In conclusion, in this year's general election, we saw the highest ever proportion of women elected to Parliament, with the House of Commons exceeding 40% women for the first time. It's important that both Houses of Parliament represent and reflect the diversity and richness of the people and cultures which make up our country. This legislation is important in moving towards more representative politics. The Liberal Democrats have been calling for significant reform of the House of Lords for decades, and whilst we are proud to support this bill and grateful it will improve the gender balance in the other place, ultimately, we would like to see our second chamber given a proper democratic mandate, and we will continue to push the government to introduce bolder and broader parliamentary reforms. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
To Navendu Mishra.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have a very brief speech, but can I welcome the progress that has been made by this House earlier this week by voting to pass the Hereditary Peers Bill through committee stage and third reading. I also welcome the fact that the government recognises the importance of consecrating more female bishops and reflecting their composition in the other chamber. Can I just mention on a more local point for me, Stockport is famous for many things, and one of those is that the Church of England's first woman bishop was the Right Reverend Libby Lane. She served as the Bishop of Stockport between 2015 and 2019. She has been mentioned by the Right Honourable Minister and my colleague from Battersea, and I just want to place on record that Stockport is known for many groundbreaking things, and this is just one of them. Libby Lane now, the Right Reverend Libby Lane now serves as the Bishop of Derby, and I want to place on record my gratitude to her for all her work in Stockport, but also across various other places where she has served. She was introduced as Lord Spiritual at the House of Lords in July 2019. She continues to do excellent work and important work in the other place. I usually don't speak in issues or debates of this nature, but I recently met the Bishop of Manchester, the Right Reverend David Walker, at All Saints Parish Church in my constituency, and we discussed many issues, including the contribution of the church, not just in Stockport, but across Greater Manchester and the North West. And he actually made me aware of the importance of this legislation and the impact of this legislation. So I also want to place in Hansard my thanks to him for highlighting this to me. I'm going to keep my remarks brief, Can I thank everyone in not just Church of England, but all churches in Stockport constituency and across Greater Manchester for all they do in providing not only spiritual guidance, but all sorts of other things, such as food banks and support with a number of other issues. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Yeah. Forgive me, I now come to a maiden speech. Anna Gelderd.
Muraz, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I begin by wishing His Majesty the King a very happy birthday, a sentiment I'm sure is shared on both sides of the House. Standing here in this house, I'm more aware than ever of the incredible privilege that it is to be here on behalf of South East Cornwall, a place that I love and am proud to call my home. I do not stand here alone, but rather I stand with those who came before me, inspired me or supported me. And I'm especially proud to be the first Labour MP to represent the area, a wonderful community filled with history, resilience and a deep local pride.
Yeah.
It is a love for the area and a steely determination to fight for its best interests that unites my predecessors and I. And I'd like to pay tribute to Cheryl Murray for her work to champion public and rescue services and the local fishing industry, and to Colin Breed before her. Madam Deputy Speaker, I intend to represent our community by extending a hand to bridge political divides and serving with the determination and humility that I've seen illuminating the paths of all those in public service that I most admire. Today's debate offers me the opportunity to particularly mention some of those women who taught me that I too could stand, including our late friend Jo Cox and the formidable Harriet Harman, both of whom I've had the honour of working with. South East Cornwall is a stunningly beautiful rural constituency defined by the natural boundaries of the River Foy to the west and the River Tamar in the east, with ancient moorland to the north and beautiful Cornish coastlines to the south, including the unique Rhine Peninsula, perfect for sea swimming, surfing and sailing. It is a place alive with history, from Restormel Castle in Lostwithiel to the historic harbour at Polperro, whose winding lanes whisper of a history of pirates and smugglers. Our economy is a story of resilience, woven from the threads of small businesses such as the market gardens of the Tamar Valley, tourism, farming, and an inshore fishing fleet that deserves more recognition and support. The market town of Liskeard, in the heart of the area geographically, provides important places for people to meet together and to form new enterprises such as Wildernet. And most importantly, it's a perfect place to find a Barncutt's pasty, and unlike many members of this house, I do know how to eat a pasty properly. We both look to the west across Cornwall and to the east beyond the Tamar for many crucial jobs. The dockyard in Devonport is particularly important to the towns of Saltash and Torfaen, where many local residents are employed. Torfaen is also the home to HMS Raleigh, providing exceptional naval training and serving as a deep source of local pride. South East Cornwall has a proud cultural heritage, celebrated in long-standing community traditions like the Gorseth, held in Callington for the first time in 40 years, the Black Prince Parade and the Saltash May Fair. It's expressed through the arts at Sturts Theatre, Cowstock Art Centre and at Maker Heights. Communities here are tight-knit, but often kept apart geographically by both distance and the lack of transport connections. But don't get me started on transport problems in Cornwall. Expect to be hearing from me again on this topic. There are incredible people across the constituency who go the extra mile, with a community fit spirit that can be found at Saltash Pride, in those working at food banks or in the care homes, or at the Core, where I held my first surgery. It is a rich place in so many ways, but there are real challenges. Above average rates of child poverty, fragile seasonal employment, and house prices out of reach for many. In my previous work, I've seen some of the big problems we face at home and abroad. The trap of extreme poverty that is so difficult to escape. The threat of instability and of conflict. The challenges posed by climate change. And I've also seen the resolve and determination of people to overcome those same challenges, struck by how sometimes the hardest of situations brings out the very best of us. This spirit can be found in organisations like the RNLI, that I was so proud to work for, or at local events such as Liskeard Unlocked, which celebrated the town's shared values of freedom, safety, solidarity, with our twinned Ukrainian town of Kopachinsi. I know that caring for my mother throughout her long period of cancer and painful death, something too many families face, has led me to this place. Without that experience, I would simply not be here. She told me to find solace in purpose, and I have. Yeah. My family gave me a bedrock of certainty that anyone, everywhere, can make a positive difference. My granddad, injured in an industrial accident, would have me sit next to him on his green leather sofa. After school, to watch PMQs, and I've no doubt that he would be shocked but proud, as I stand now, by these green leather benches, which felt so very far away from our lives or our experiences. Clearly, children's earliest experiences are so formative and early education so pivotal. Just look at the trouble that early experience has got me into now. So I don't want where you're born to limit where you're going.
Absolutely.
Or what you can do to be determined by who you know. Breaking down the barriers to opportunities isn't a campaign slogan for me. It's a guiding principle and what I intend to deliver for my community. The beauty of our landscapes in our special corner of Cornwall, it's not just a backdrop to our lives, it's the backbone of our economy and integral to our identity and well-being. I'm committed to supporting our farmers and our fishing industry, the lifeblood of our community, who provide our food security and a critical, important relationship with the landscape. I'm committed to improving our transport links that currently hamper growth and divide communities, and to securing better access to healthcare service and SEND provision within the constituency, and to preserving the rugged, distinct natural environment that so defines our region and brings huge economic value to our vital tourist industry. Cornwall helped power Britain's first industrial revolution and now stands ready to lead the new green industrial revolution, harnessing new technologies and the aspirations of our young people to create a sustainable future. South East Cornwall is both a gateway to Cornwall and a bridge to the rest of the UK, as embodied by the Thamesmead Bridge. I intend to also be a bridge for our community, to work tirelessly to connect Cornwall to the resources, opportunities and support that it deserves. And so I stand here ultimately with gratitude for the incredible people of South East Cornwall. I've seen generosity and determination that inspire me daily, and that is why I'm here and why I'm honoured to be working to connect our past, our present, and to help build our future together.
The member for South East Cornwall gave a very authentic, powerful speech. She should be proud, as would her mother and her grandfather. I now come to the front benches and the Shadow Minister, Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'll just make some brief remarks just on the speeches made today. I thought it was an incredibly moving speech by the member for South East Cornwall. I remember her predecessor well. We served on the 1922 committee together, and I thought her mention of the RNLI was particularly poignant. As a former transport minister as well, the Tamar crossing was something which came up regularly with her predecessor and other honourable members, and I'm sure it's something she will be taking forwards too. I was delighted to hear her mention traditional food of pasties. I've had my own campaign around pie and mash at the moment, so perhaps that's something we could work on together in protecting local foodstuffs. I thought the speeches from the members for Battersea and Stockport mentioning some of those female bishops who've really been trailblazers in this space were superb. I noted the honourable member for Richmond Park's comments reflecting on the former Prime Minister, our first British Asian Prime Minister, and our current Leader of the Opposition, who is our first black female leader of a UK political party. I think, in the words of the member for Richmond and Northallerton, I think we'd like to say it's not a big deal, but that's the way things have worked out. I would just caution, though, the member for Newcastle-under-Lyme, who is always famous already for his sort of slightly cheeky contributions in the chamber, to be careful what he wishes for in having more opposition members to speak about bishops in debates at the moment. And I shall give way to the government from bench.
I'll call the Minister, Abena Oppong-Asare.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to begin by congratulating the Shadow Paymaster General in his role. It's a pleasure to close this debate today on this focused but most important piece of legislation. I very much enjoyed listening to the thoughtful contributions made by colleagues across all sides of the House, and I'll do my best to respond to them in time available. As my right honourable friend, the Paymaster General and the Minister for Cabinet Office, said in his opening speech, this is a straightforward but important bill requested by the Church that simply extends for a further 5 years. The arrangements agreed by this House in 2015. There has been significant progress since this in addressing the gender imbalance on the benches of the Law Spiritual, but I hope honourable members will appreciate that such a short extension is reasonable and proportionate in ensuring this continues. A number of important and interesting contributions have been made by members during this debate, including, I would like to also really put on record that my congratulations to the Honourable Member for Cornwall South East. Yeah. She gave an incredible, powerful story about her grandfather and her mother. Your personal story would have touched the lives of many today. Yeah. And I also want to say, I also share your ethos in breaking down barriers. Her speech made some of the most important points, but I also do believe that her constituents appreciate that they're hard-working Member of Parliament, and as I know, as a graduate of the women-only Murray Edwards College, Cambridge, she joins the ranks of many notable and brilliant women making the mark on public life, and she's spoken about her inspirations from Jo Cox and Harriet Harman, who are inspirational women. My honourable friend, the member for Stockport, speaks with a great passion and knowledge. His constituency of Stockport has played an important role in our story. The Right Reverend Libby Blaine, who was made Bishop of Stockport in 2015 and became the first female ever bishop. Her conservation reminds us of the need for pioneers and trailblazers. My honourable friend, the member for Battersea, has become the 43rd Second Church Estate Commissioner. And I had the opportunity to meet with her this week to discuss this bill. And I know she'll bring all of her political and personal skills to providing the bridge between Parliament and the established church at a difficult time for the Anglican Communion. She will be brilliant in that role. My honourable friend for Battersea spoke powerfully of the female bishops, particularly about the importance of diversity, of underrepresented groups, which I know the Church is looking at, and I know that she will be a champion in raising those issues. Shadow Paymaster General rightly asked why the 5-year time frame has been selected. We believe that the 5-year is an appropriate time which we will review in collaboration with the Church of England closer to 2030. The Honourable Member for Richmond Park has been a champion of diversity in the other place. She rightly asked whether we'll be making wider progress. This bill is a narrow bill and not part of the government's wider House of Lords reform agenda. It was requested by the Church of England to extend arrangements put in place by the 2015 Act. And as you will know, it's due to expire in next year, May, so it's important we introduce it now. As a first step in a wider reform, the government has introduced the House of Lords bill, which I know she has spoken very favourably of. And this is a focus bill that will deliver the government's manifesto commitment to bring about immediate reform by removing the right of the remaining hereditary peers to sit and vote in the House of Lords. And the government is committed to other reforms of the House of Lords, which she rightly mentioned, which includes the introduction of mandatory retirement age, a new participation requirement, and changes to the appointment process, as well as strengthening the circumstances in which disgraced members can be moved. There is also a long-term commitment to replace the other place with an alternative second chamber that is more representative of the regions and nations. And given the nature and potential scale of these reforms, the government will conduct engagement and consult on these proposals, seeking the input of the British public on how politics can best serve them. As my right honourable friend noted when he opened this debate, this year marks the 10-year anniversary since women were able to be appointed as bishops in the Church of England. This year also marks another important anniversary. It is 30 years since the first women were ordained as Church of England priests, when 32 women were ordained at Bristol Cathedral in 1994. In the past 30 years, the Church has made significant progress in valuing the leadership role that women can make in the life of the Church. I'll be delighted to give way in a moment, and this bill simply extends existing provisions to ensure the progress can continue.
And I just want to thank my honourable friend and also congratulate her on her speech. She is setting out exactly why this small piece of legislation is so important, but also thanking her for acknowledging that for 30 years now we have seen women being ordained. And whilst it's important, does she agree with me that you know, celebrating the progress that women have made not only in this place but in the church is crucially important, and that is why I'm very grateful that this government is also bringing forward this bill so we can get it through.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to raise the importance of female representation, particularly in the church. The long history of women's progress in this country teaches us one thing: that it cannot be left to chance. This is why it is so important that we put forward this bill. Women must organise, women must keep up the pressure in institutions and must change, but our own Parliament must also see this change. Between 1918 and 2024, a total of only 693 women have been elected as members of this House. As the honourable member mentioned earlier about female representation in Parliament, today, as July 2024, there are 263 women in this House, the highest ever. This is an all-time high at 40%, yet even now we still need to be truly reflective of our society.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I'll be delighted to give way.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for the Minister for giving way. I'm really pleased to hear her setting out exactly what a representative chamber should look like, and I was especially pleased to hear her comments to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson about the broader reforms that we are proposing to the other place. I was proudly here on Tuesday night to talk about the third reading, to talk about the amendments, and I was so proud to vote in favour of removing the 92 hereditary peers in the other place. But can I ask my honourable friend, she makes the commitment to reform the other place. Do we have any timescales in mind, and can we commit to the public and to this House that the reforms will come forward within the first term of a Labour government?
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for raising this point, and also for his part on Tuesday, making sure that we'll be able to get this important bill through. As my honourable friend will know, this is an important step, the first step that we are making towards reforming the House of Lords. And I hope my honourable friend recognises that as a government, we are taking this very seriously, particularly in making sure that we deliver the government's manifesto to make sure that we look at immediate reform, particularly when looking at removing the right of hereditary peers to sit and vote in the House of Lords. And I hope that he'll be able to contribute when we progress this through at a later stage. As I mentioned earlier, this particular bill is a narrow bill which was presented in 2015, and what we need to do is make sure we improve the female representation, particularly on the bit when it comes to the House of Lords in terms of bishops. As my honourable friend for Battersea mentioned, the contributions that have already been made by the female bishops that have come into their roles shows the significant changes they can make, particularly through the diversity that they bring in terms of voices. And if we don't do that, it will mean that we'll revert back to the way we were. We'll be going back in terms of male representation within the House of Lords.
Will the Minister?
Yes.
I thank the Minister for giving way. She's making an excellent speech. Can I echo the point made by my honourable friend for Battersea? And I believe she welcomed that there were more women bishops in Church of England, but also the point about having women bishops of colour. I understand there are several women bishops in Church of England of colour now, but the need to do more to make sure that people from underrepresented segments and demographics are represented in the higher structures of Church of England is very important. So I just wanted to echo that point, and I wonder if she will join me in thanking our honourable friend for Battersea in making that point.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for raising this point. This is a matter that I also raised in a conversation with my honourable friend for Battersea in her new role and with the Church of representative from the Church of England in terms of looking at the racial diversity and also the wider representation of disabled people. As my honourable friend may know, it is for the Church to determine how bishops are appointed. And they have mentioned they are committed to increasing diversity among bishops. The pipeline is currently being reviewed by the Church in regards to senior roles to look at encouraging the greatest possible participation of underrepresented groups. Yes.
Well, I thank my honourable friend. She is making an excellent speech, and all the interventions in this place have been incredible. But just talking about representation, and she's absolutely right, this is something that the Church of England is now taking seriously. It led the way in setting up its racial justice task force, and it now has its racial justice commission that is working on this area. Representation is important, not just at the top of the church, but all the way down to the parish and diocese level and all the way up through. We need greater representation, not just of women, but those of black and ethnic minority communities, but as well as disabled people. And I'm sure she would agree with me that the church has got to get this right.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this point, which is why I'm absolutely delighted that she's in the role that she is now, because I know that she will champion this particular issue really well. The representation at all levels is absolutely important, and I'll be looking to see what the Church of England does to strengthen their diversity in this area. With this particular bill, it is about the role, in a moment, it is about the role on a number of laws spiritual, and it's simply aimed at extending the provisions of the 2015 Act to ensure that more female bishops enter into the House of Lords. I'd be delighted to give way to the honourable member opposite.
I thank the honourable lady for giving way. I just wondered, in reflection of some of the comments the honourable lady for Battersea was making, wouldn't it be great to see some more crossbench peers from the retired bishops as well in the House of Lords, particularly perhaps for the female bishops coming forwards in those roles as well, perhaps going through the appointments position for appointments for people who've contributed to public life as well.
I'd like to thank the honourable member opposite for that helpful suggestion, which is something that could be looked at the next stage. I also do know that he did a lot of work of this in this area, particularly as advisor when this was going forward as a policy at the House of Lords. So I welcome his insight into this area. I also like to say that I think the contributions on this debate has been extremely powerful. I know that there's been lengthy conversations about this particular bill in the other place. I'll be delighted to give way.
Mishra?
I'm very grateful to her for allowing me a second intervention. I know she's made comments about the first woman bishop and the fact that the first woman bishop was the Bishop of Stockport. Will she officially, in her role as a Minister of the Crown, congratulate the Right Reverend Libby Lane, who serves in the other chamber, and mark the point I'm making about the wonderful constituency of Stockport?
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for Stockport for raising this. As I can see, he's a trailblazer for his constituency and is very passionate about the first female bishop who I believe is a trailblazer and a role model to many women up and down the country. I also like to say that this particular bill is a simple bill which I can't see. I'd like to give way.
I thank you for giving way. Thank the Minister for giving way. I will take the opportunity to try and be a trailblazer for my constituency of Harlow, where we have some fantastic women representatives in the church. I want to particularly pay tribute, if I may, to Reverend Joki Points, who during the terrible pandemic did so much to support residents in my constituency by delivering food parcels and continues to champion my community.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for championing the women in his constituency of Harlow. On that note, I also like to champion the females in my constituency who work hard and in my constituency to make sure that my constituency is very well represented on matters. And also, as my honourable friends for Battersea and others have said, diversity is so important across the community. If we don't make sure that the House of Lords, bishops, looks like us, how will we be able to make sure we are able to advocate effectively for constituents?
I know there are many colleagues interested in this debate. Can I encourage interventions to be relevant to the debate that's taking place? Your intervention.
So can I thank my honourable friend? She's doing a fantastic job of ensuring bringing this bill through that women's representation is at every level. I mean, we shouldn't be in the 21st century talking about firsts for women. But could I also, in the spirit of what my colleagues have done, could she also recognise the brilliant role of the first black woman here in the House of Commons as the Speaker's chaplain, who then rose to be the Bishop in Dover, the Reverend Rose Hudson-Wilkin, and also the Reverend Tricia Hillis. So Parliament is seen as a very important place for the representation of women, and I very much support what my honourable friend is doing in ensuring this bill makes progress.
Excellent.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for raising those two trailblazers. Those women are inspiration to me, and I know many others. I also would like to conclude by saying we should never ever take our foot off the gas and never rest on our laurels. This is a time in Parliament to make sure that we can do what we can to improve female representation. I won't at a moment. And this bill, as I've mentioned on many occasions, is a simple bill to essentially extend provisions to ensure progress continues to be reflected on the benches of the Lord's spiritual. We have a long way to go in improving female representation, but one thing that I can say is that this country teaches us one thing, which is that it cannot be left to chance. So I urge everyone to support this bill, and Madam Deputy Speaker, I therefore commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many of their opinions say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Programme motion to be moved formally. The question is, as on the order paper, as many of their opinions say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. That concludes that proportion of that business.